Kia ora and welcome to our next video with Alexander the Great, and we're talking about the revolts in the north. So quick recap, so Alexander has become king with the assassination of his father, but as I talked about in the previous video, he's not Philip. He's 20, he's new to the throne, he's promising, but he certainly isn't proven, and so the Greek states are kind of looking at each other wondering, do we have to actually obey Macedon any longer now that Philip is not there? In typical Greek state fashion, they're all kind of waiting to see what happens when one of the other states will make a move. And so what we have is the states in the north are the states that do rebel against Alexander. Now, the first people that we are interested in here to involve are those in the area called Thrace, which is just up here. As you can see, here's Macedon here, here's Greece down through here. Thrace is, that's modern day Eastern Bulgaria, perhaps. Now, this area was not under Macedonian control, but they decided to rebel against Alexander. It's very close to home to Macedonia, the fact they share a border. So this is both a threat and an opportunity. They are a threat because they are so close to Macedonia, but it's also an opportunity for Alexander to prove himself by squashing this rebellion and thus perhaps making the rest of the Greek states think twice about not obeying the orders of Macedon. Now, Thrace was and is a very mountainous area, huge steep mountains running down into ravines with rivers at the bottom. And now what the Thracians believed would be the best plan was that as the Macedonians wind their way through, like along the riverbeds or along the dry ravines here, what the Thracians planned to do was to fill heavy wooden carts with rocks and roll those wooden carts thundering down the mountainside and hopefully crashing into the Macedonian ranks and thus causing a large number of deaths. This was the plan. The Thracians hoping that these carts would kill a large number of Macedonians and hopefully make them panic. Now, what Alexander did was he simply ordered his men that where there is space, step aside to let the carts just crash through. And where there is not space, lie down, hold the shields overhead, lock the shields together, and the carts should bounce over the shields, thus protecting the men. Now, this is actually exactly what happened. Where there was space, the Macedonian army would just simply step aside and let the carts thunder through them. And when there wasn't space for them to move, they lay down and put their shields over their head, and the carts bounced harmlessly overhead. Now, this is quite important because you would have to be in charge of a very disciplined and well-trained army to do this effectively. When you think about these heavy carts that are crashing down the mountainside towards you, certain death if you're caught in their path, the urge not to panic and to run would have been quite strong. But so disciplined was this army that Alexander inherited from his father, they obeyed his orders, they waited to see where the carts were going to go, and they stepped aside. Moreover, where there wasn't any room, the discipline not to panic and run, to lie down, put the shields over the heads, and have the carts bounce harmlessly over, speaks volumes to the training of the army that Alexander inherited from his father Philip. And this is indeed what happened. And Arrian tells us that the carts passed harmlessly over the heads, and there were no casualties. The Thracians, seeing that their plan hadn't worked, panicked and ran for the hills. Many of them were caught by Alexander's mountain troops, who pursued them up the hills and killed many of them. So that's the Thracians dealt with. Then we have the Triballi in this area in the red in this image. Now they were hiding behind a dense tree line, probably like some sort of a small wood or copse, if you will. And what they were doing was they were throwing their spears and shooting their arrows at the Macedonians as the Macedonians advanced. Alexander pulled back his army. Most of the army could not be seen by the Triballi because they were behind a low dip in the ground. And Alexander called forward his slingers. Now, as you can see here in the image, they have no armor. What their goal is to come right to the front, hurl these, well, they're called shot actually, really dense stones, hurl those at the enemy, and then run away as soon as things get a bit hot. And so these slingers come forward, and now they have a greater range than the spears and the arrows that have been thrown by the Triballi. So the slingers are able to pelt the Tribali with their shot, as the Tribali can't do anything about it. They can't actually reach the slingers with their spears and their arrows. And so they get very, very frustrated at what's happening, and they charge out from the tree line. The rest of Alexander's army comes up, surrounds the Tribali, and 3,000 of them were killed, according to Arrian. And then we have the Getae, who were on the far side of the river Danube. Now, they actually stood and taunted Alexander from the far bank, because knowing he had no boats, they were convinced that he would not be able to cross the river. That night, the Getae were so confident that they did not post sentries. What Alexander did is he got the tents, and he got his men to lay them down flat on the ground and filled them with the hay that had been brought to feed the horses. Tie the tents up, and you have a rudimentary floating device. And so Alexander and his men were able to cross the Danube at night, holding on to these flotation devices. As I said, the Getae had been so confident they didn't leave any sentries. Alexander was able to surround them. When the Getae looked up in the morning and saw the Macedonians, they turned and fled, and they abandoned their town. And so we've got three examples here of Alexander using this highly disciplined and well-trained army that is inherited from Philip to quash these uprisings. And the northern revolt was crushed. As Plutarch says, he swiftly dealt with them, he swiftly dealt with the uprisings, and there were no further troubles from the north in Alexander's reign. He does have an urge to go a little bit further, and this is when we see what is known as his pothos, his desire to go a little bit further to see what's over the next horizon. And he goes and meets an emissary of the Celts, the Celtic people who make up France, most of modern day Germany, and the British Isles as well. As you can see in these images here, they were fierce warriors, bigger than Greeks and the Romans later, who were also terrified of them. They'd fight in the nude, covered in blue paint, blue woad it was called. Alexander asked the Celts that he met, "What is your worst fear?" hoping that they would say something like, "Oh, we fear that you are going to keep coming further north." Their response was, "We only fear one thing, that the sky might fall on our head." And if you've ever read your Asterix books, you will know where this comes from. So, Alexander had dealt with the revolts in the north. He had proved himself. But then we come to a serious uprising. The city of Thebes in Greece decides that they're going to rebel against Macedonian control. Now, this is big trouble. This is a major, major problem. Greece is one of the most important cities in Greece. Thebes is one of the most important cities in Greece. They've decided to rebel against Macedon. Other Greek states, particularly Athens, will sit back and see how this goes. This is a problem for Alexander. He needs to crush this rebellion very, very quickly. It's also an opportunity. If he deals with Thebes, then there's no way that any other Greek state is going to rebel. The Athenians promised the Thebans help, but in typical Athenian style, they just sat back and waited to see what would happen. Alexander needs to move from the north, and he needs to move very, very fast and get down to Thebes and sort this problem out. Now, what I would like you to do is on Classroom, I'll just put this over here. There is the sheet called the Theban Revolt, which I need you to go and have a look at and to watch the video, complete the questions, and complete the activities that come with it. Okay, so it's called the Theban Revolt, and it is on Classroom. I'll just move our screen over here. Okay, so if you can watch that video that's on there and complete the activities that follow, that would be the best thing to do. Thebes is very, very important to understand of Alexander. Okay, cool. Ka kite.